So once again, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for this special event presented by the Tweed Museum of Art. My name is Colin Nelson Dushek, and I'm the educator at the Tweed. And for this evening, the event is My Grandma and Your Grandma, an interview with Jonathan Thunder. And I'm very pleased to have Jonathan here. Before we get started, I'm going to say a few introductory remarks and some administrative details for our presentation. You will see on the chat as well, I've put a few web links up there, and I will talk about them. Jonathan Thunder's website, so you can see more of his art and also a little bit more about him as well. There is a link to the Tweed Museum of Art website for more information on our current exhibitions and operating hours. And also there's a link to the University of Minnesota Duluth's land acknowledgement. And I'm going to read that right now before we get started. We collectively acknowledge that the University of Minnesota Duluth is located on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of Indigenous people. The university resides on land that was cared for and called home by the Ojibwe people, before them the Dakota and Northern Cheyenne people, and other Native peoples from time immemorial. Ceded by the Ojibwe in an 1854 treaty, this land holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards, the Native nations and peoples of this region. We recognize and continually support and advocate for the sovereignty of the Native nations in this territory and beyond. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm tribal sovereignty and will work to hold the University of Minnesota Duluth accountable to American Indian peoples and nations. And as I said, also, if you want to learn more about the land acknowledgement from UMD, you can look in the chat log, and it has more information there. Oh, I just see that we don't have any links. Let me just copy and paste that again, just for everybody's information. And hopefully that went through to everybody at this point. But if you have any other questions, please do let me know in the chat. Also, before we get started, I'd like to give some acknowledgements to our supporters as well. This program and the Tweed are supported by Minnesota's Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment, the Minnesota State Arts Board, and also the Student Services Fee at the University of Minnesota Duluth. We at the Tweed thank all the organizations for the support that they give the museum and its programming. So without further ado, I'll also begin our introduction to Jonathan Thunder. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest for the evening, who you see sitting next to me through the wonder of the internet, Jonathan Thunder. Jonathan is a Duluth-based artist whose work addresses contemporary social, political, and cultural matters through surreal visuals and animation. An enrolled member of the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe, his art often includes imagery inspired by his heritage. Jonathan attended the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe and studied visual effects and motion graphics at the Art Institute International in Minneapolis. He has exhibited across the country and received numerous awards and grants for his paintings and animations, including a 2020-2021 grant from the Pollock Krasner Foundation. His work is in the collection of numerous museums and universities in Minnesota and beyond. At the Tweed, Jonathan was previously commissioned to create the highly acclaimed multimedia installation Manifesto. That work is now on view at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, and it's there until September of 2023. So if anybody's traveling through the airport, I highly recommend to take some extra time to go view the work. It's wonderful. Jonathan was in residence at the Tweed in fall of 2021 to complete the current installation, which we'll be talking about tonight, My Grandma and Your Grandma. And this work is on display at the museum until May 15th of this year. With all that said, Jonathan, thank you very, very much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me as a guest.
Yeah, so as we go forth, I will just say one more thing before we jump into the discussion about the work. For people, we are setting this up to have a 30-minute interview between myself and also Jonathan. And then for the last 15 minutes, we will open up to the audience for questions for Jonathan. And I would request that when you're asking questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom app. And then once we get to the point where we will start talking about Q&A, I will just pull from there. If you have any questions, you can also just ask them in the chat. I will be monitoring that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a display of my grandma and your grandma, and we will start from there. All right. And here we are. This is the overall view of my grandma and your grandma. As I mentioned, this was completed by Jonathan in fall of 2021. So still a very recent installation at the Tweed. So why don't we just jump in, Jonathan? And I was just wondering if you could share with us the background of this project, a little bit more about where it came from, what was the timeline, and just what was the origin of this project.
Yeah, absolutely. I was working with Carissa Isaacs White, who was she was the curator on Manifesto in 2017 or 18, a few years back, and they were mentioning that the Tweed had a program where they would bring in an artist to work on kind of like a mural or some sort of art project. And students would be able to come and learn and work with the artist as well, and wanted to know if I was interested. And I loved working with Carissa and the Tweed back when Manifesto was being put together. So of course I said yes. And over maybe like the course of about a year, I think the project sort of came together. She asked me if I would just kind of write up some ideas, that I had in my head. And during this time, Minneapolis, was experiencing some changes, and some times around the murder of George Floyd. So that was kind of on my mind. And of course we are in the middle of a pandemic. That was on my mind. Also, the whole line 3 struggle, was sort of like right in, the final round. And that was on my mind as well. I started to think that, I guess, if I was going to propose anything that would go into an institute of education, in a museum setting, that I would be working with young minds, or, students, I guess you could say. I wanted to do something that warranted discussion. So I came up with a few ideas, and my grandma and your grandma, the mural, ended up being the concept that we all kind of liked the best. So after that, I made up a draft and we went from there.
Thank you. So if I could, I just want to talk about the community aspect of that, or ask about it. That you did this in collaboration with students as well, and that was part of the creative process. And I was just wondering, as you were doing that, what was the process of creation when you're working with a group of students? And also, did you find that your approach or your own thoughts or ideas were changing as you're going through this communal this communal action of creativity?
Yeah, by the time the students were involved, it was, the drawing had been created. It was sort of, the image itself was a pencil sketch. And so to speak, it was a pencil sketch I did on my iPad, but there was no color, or anything like that added. The amount of space that it was going to take up, like these 6 panels, I think in the sketch were originally going to be on 8 panels. So when the student group was kind of formed and we got together, kind of there was this process of figuring out the tech side on how to condense all the imagery into these 6 panels. So I think one of the students volunteered some projectors from the art program, And I brought in my laptop and we hooked it up and just kind of went through and lined everything up. That way I made a fit, drawing onto the canvas with some larger sort of like sketching pencils. And then there was no color schematic at this time. There was no kind of like, this is going to be red and this is going to be white. But I did want to throw a curveball to the students who most of them had painting experience. Actually, I think, well, we got, we had some people that came and went, but there was a handful of students that were pretty consistent. And those students all had painting experience. But the curveball that I threw them was our colors were going to be black, white, and red. And for me, I think, it was just something that I wanted to take from my studio practice, because I've been working monochromatically at home. Even more, I guess, of a limited palette than what we're working with here. And just challenge the students to kind of take all of these details and push them up against each other and like figure out, like what values, what values are going to work best. And it was it was fun. It was kind of a surprise, I think, at first, when they found out that it was just going to be 3 colors that we were going to be using. But immediately we started to figure it out. And that was the process, I would say. It was just more like, instead of, obviously I weighed in on things, but I think in the painting experience, everybody had to figure out like how far to push the values and make stuff work, and what should go where, as far as like mixing black with white, like how gray, how black, how white. And then I would say the different kind of color temperatures of red, that were involved, because this photograph that we're looking at here actually it's a good photograph, but we're on a Zoom call, it's being streamed. You go to the actual site and there's a couple more values in this, as far as like the red color scale and color space goes. So that was sort of the collaborative process. And some of the details actually changed between the sketch to the canvas, and it was not much, but it just kind of had to be pushed around a little bit.
As you're talking about these kind of the vividness of the red, it's another like a push for people to make it to the tweet also to see it, because as you said, this is of course a visual, but you don't get the true sense of the colors here. That's just the nature of technology. I wanted to ask about the panels themselves and looking at this and how it's set up and arranged. And I am looking specifically at the splits that are going on in the panels, and looking at the center figure of your grandma and how it's very much split down the middle. Is there a symbolic reason, or what is the kind of interpretation that you give to the separation? Is there something deeper? Is it just that working with the materials that you were working with?
I think it was kind of an organic process that ended up becoming a little bit of the design, like a little bit of the concept. The project turned into a mural installation over the course of talking. We weren't exactly sure what this project was going to be. And as it became a quote unquote mural project, I wanted to figure out a way that this thing could be easily broken down and moved. So I opted for, I think it's 6 5x5 foot canvases stretched on wood. So very light, very easy to just kind of like break down the mural and put it in a stack. And the even number kind of, I guess that dictated how the sketch was going to be put apart. And since the concept is, I guess, the two communities, the indigenous community and the Black community, sort of having these kind of parallel narratives, I guess you could say, it was something that came together on the canvases. The Black grandmother and the indigenous grandmother sort of being together, but there's like a line, sort of dividing them just to create those two cultural differences.
Thank you very much. Why don't we zoom in a little bit and look at more of the details? So we've seen the overall, but let's start talking about some of the panels and looking at them more specifically. So this is a further close-up of the left side of the painting, and you can we can see here, and you talked a little bit about this in the wall label for the work. You talk about the inspiration you had not only from hip hop culture, but seeing the similarities between your upbringing and the similarities between indigenous cultures and indigenous communities and Black communities, especially some of the challenges that both communities have faced. And just looking at this, you mentioned, we'll bring up the farthest left panel, the police car. So you're talking about if you could talk a little bit more about that. And you mentioned, of course, the murder of George Floyd as being something that was very much in your mind, as was everybody in the state of Minnesota and across the nation. So here, we talked about this previously, and as I was looking at this, I was noticing the police car has this, I mentioned it looks like an older model, like a Crown Victoria almost, of like the police cars. Was there like a specific approach you had in mind to that, or what were you thinking of as you were creating this, or as this was part of the work?
I think when I was thinking about how 80s and 90s hip hop had an influence on me by listening to the lyrics, of lyricists like Chuck D and KRS-One, and hearing similar stories to what I was kind of hearing in my own family and community in Minneapolis and in Red Lake. I just thought that, this is not this whole thing that's happening this year and last year, throughout time, is not a new conversation. So I kind of wanted to point to the time that I guess I started hearing, like people, even mainstream artists talking about it, in mainstream media, and, just kind of incorporating it into their platform. So I think that's why I fell on this. Plus, it looks way more, to me, iconic of what a cop car looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Like nowadays they're like Chargers and Ford Explorers and stuff like that. Yeah. So aesthetically, it was just much more interesting, but narrative wise, it was kind of like, you think about like, there was a movie called Who's the Man by Ed Lover and Dr. Dre, who were the hosts of a program called Yo MTV Raps. Mm-hmm. And the kind of like big joke of the show was like, what if there were two Black guys from the hood that became cops, like, and it was just pointing to the relationship, between the police community and the Black community, as kind of like an absurdity. So I think those were some things that kind of like subconsciously went into my psyche as I was just drawing it out, and just wanted to discuss, like, not in depth, but give people a chance to talk about it and discuss, like how far back it goes for them, like how far back does this conversation go, and what kind of went into that.
Yeah, certainly, to open up and have a space for conversing about it. Moving on, I just want to open this back up, and if I don't want to get too much ahead of you, but also pulling from the wall label, the three figures, the musical trio. You mentioned specifically the Dixie Cups as being an inspiration. So, do the Dixie Cups have a particular meaning to you? And you also talk about the influence of the Mardi Gras Indians as well, and this part of New Orleans culture. So how is that influencing your inclusion in this painting?
It's something that just kind of happened as I was thinking about the grandma concept. I started thinking about these lyrics from this song, Iko Iko, where they're saying my grandma and your grandma. And I was remembering hearing that song growing up. And I often like to reference musicians, song titles, song lyrics in my work. I've even named paintings after some of my favorite songs. But I started to research this group, like, okay, so if there's anything with this, like, what is it? And I found out that, they came from New Orleans, the Dixie Cups, they came from New Orleans, and they were kind of paying homage to their culture, which was this kind of like Mardi Gras Indians celebration that takes place every year in New Orleans. And what it does is they dress up kind of like in a, like a made up sort of regalia based on what they've seen from tribes, in the area. And it's a tribute. It's a tribute to when slaves were given safe haven on Indian land with tribes, and became part of the community, started families, and the folks that participate in the Mardi Gras Indian Parade are generally indigenous by culture, but identify as Black Americans just because it's, kind of like more, I guess, just easier to, go through their day like that or something like that. So I guess in thinking of what my concept was for this project, I thought that was a great thing to reference. I thought it was like a way to bring things full circle, because that narrative, that early, that sort of historical reference points to what I witnessed in Minneapolis in 2020 and 2021. I was being asked to create some artwork for community organizations in South Minneapolis. And the concept that I went with was that, we're stronger together, like Black people and indigenous people face a common problem, a hurdle, obstacle, whatever you want to call it. And working together just seemed to be the best option.
Mm-hmm. Looking at this also, the three figures, I noticed that of all the characters in this, their faces are left blank. And is this idea of everybody stronger together, that it's everybody coming together. So it's not just one individual person, but it could be an entire community.
I like it. Yeah, no, that actually, I like that, like, I don't want to bring people, the thing about this kind of work is, like, I don't want to bring you the whole way. So I like when you see stuff like that in it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's almost like I want to show you the rabbit hole, and then you go down it, right? So I think what had to, full disclosure, what happened was we were in like the last week of painting this thing, and just kind of it worked out that we left out the details of their face. I think it was just more of like a not only like time sensitivity, but we weren't sure, if it was going to work with the composition to try to model their faces, completely.
Yeah.
From a technical standpoint, to all of you painters out there who know about keeping things, like on time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's like you said, it adds, new interpretations to it. And viewing it.
Yeah, that's the danger of breaking out those tiny little brushes that are just like the size of two hairs, is like, then you're making up everybody's mind for them, right?
Right.
So the bigger the brush, the bigger the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. All right, so let's move on. I know that we have just a limited amount of time, but
Mhm.
we're just progressing through the figures here, and we have a traditional dancer in regalia here, and when you're talking about what's weighing on our minds and thinking about not only George Floyd but the pandemic too, looking at this, and this is bringing my own subjectivity too. Of course, we have a mask here, but there is also this idea of the pandemic, and it's looking at this. There are these notions of the pandemic mask, or just masking in general, has been such a prevalent part of our lives for the last 2 years. So in that's of course bringing my own subjectivity and interpretation into this, but of course I'd love to hear from you as the importance of this figure in this painting.
Yeah, obviously, right on about the mask. Like we are in a culture of um, masks, no masks. Masks have always been a theme in my work. Masks, costumes, design. Like layers. Characters with layers of their identity. In I would say the last couple of years, I've been even a manifesto. I was kind of pointing to this plague mask design, back before the pandemic, and that was about cultural pandemic, like erasure. This is kind of tying the COVID pandemic in to make it contemporary, and just sort of pointing to the woodland style dancer here as a way of contrasting with like actual indigenous culture references versus kind of what I would call friendly appropriation by the Dixie Cups. And as we get down to the end of the mural, we can talk more about the difference between what I would say is, to me, acceptable appropriation versus appropriation for the sake of covering up a narrative.
So talking about that, because yeah, as you were saying, this kind of ties in to these multiple figures, and I certainly want to talk about the far right of the painting too, and to see this narrative that's being woven through the entire panel. But looking at this also, we have the central figure, the you could say the titular character of this work, and so we have the grandma figure being as a central figure, also the master of ceremonies, the MC, who is spinning the turntable. And what was the role of your grandmother in your life? In the sense that she is kind of this radial, or this almost kind of this anchor of this work. How did that kind of influence your interpretation?
I wanted to just I think there was a couple of reasons, and one of them is really simple. This whole hip hop theme that I was doing, I wanted to make this entire mural look just like a big crazy almost like a, I don't know, like you ever see those movies where they have like dance battles and stuff like that, but it's all, everybody's like, just there for, a purpose. Something like that. And I was thinking about this medallion that my grandma used to wear. It was like this huge beaded medallion with a Thunderbird on it. And I actually have a photograph of it around here somewhere, but it was later after I started kind of like, I guess, maybe getting into my 30s, I started noticing young men wearing big beaded medallions. And I think it was around the time that I saw hip hop culture really kind of like melding with powwow culture, just like in the dress code, the aesthetic, because a lot of these young guys were probably listening to some of the same stuff that I was listening to. And I don't know for sure 100% if that's what happened, is like, in hip hop, there's like Mike D from the Beastie Boys had the Volkswagen, big giant Volkswagen
Yeah.
symbol hanging from a chain on his neck, and, like Run DMC.
Mhm.
But then I started seeing young men wearing these big medallions. So to me, that looked like hip hop. That looked like culture influencing culture.
Mhm.
and I also wanted to have some fun with this image. I think if you're not having any fun, then you're not doing it right. Like then what's the point? So to me, this made it exciting. Like it was a fun enough image for me to really want to just kind of like bring a lot of these things to life. And I always, I think, I guess on a personal note, I kind of think about my grandma as maybe being one of the first people in my family that I learned, could draw. So kind of has I guess, a special place, like most people's grandmas, I'm sure.
Mhm. Looking at this also, when you're talking about how music plays an important part in your work and how it's influential and how you create, but looking at the fact that she is mixing on a turntable, so there's this remix, but it makes me think about like a musical remix kind of spilling out into a visual remix, because you see all these different parts of culture mixing it and creating something new and wonderful in this work too. So it is interesting that the musical it has this is being translated to the visual here.
Beautiful.
No.
I love this, man. This is great.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
I was curious about her hat as well. Is this just once again part of hip hop dress, hip hop culture? Is this something that also that she personally owned?
I was referencing, there's this book. It was one of the first books that I ever had, and it's called A People Called the Chippewa. And on the cover, there's this elder, this Nokomis, this grandmother, who's wearing that hat, and it's not a big red hat it's a black and white photo. The hat could have been any color, but just pointing to that generation, in indigenous culture, and kind of like thinking about like where Black grandmothers were at during that time in US history, with everything that's been going on, all the adversity that my grandmother, had to face, and her grandmother, to get me to where I'm at today.
This is goodness gracious. I wish we could talk about this all night, but we have to move on. But thank you very much for those comments and the insight there. Oh, I'm sorry. I had another just a better close up of this work. So just for everybody to see, just for a few moments, just the central figure of the grandmother here, and now moving on to the right side of the installation of the quote mural. So we have once again another dancing figure here, but we have a breaker. So somebody just engaged in the middle of a windmill, talking about the musical, the party aspect of this work, but also adopting the mask, but interpreting or having it used in a new way here. So it's I was just wondering, in not only the hip hop aspect of this, but also 80s and 90s hip hop culture, is the breakdancing figure also something that is near and dear to your heart?
Yeah, I remember being 11 and getting a Run DMC album at the Cub Foods, not too far from my house. And it was on a rack by the checkout lane next to a Beastie Boys album. And then I got into, I discovered breakdancing. I even took a lesson, like a class, which I was kicked out of for doing a head spin.
Really?
Yeah, because it was, the instructor was very clear. He's like, if anybody tries to do a head spin in my class, that's it, you're gone.
Wow.
And he wasn't kidding. It was like immediate. But I was just like, I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I remember me and my cousin used to try to get really good at it. And then I just became more, like a spectator, I guess you could say. I was better at drawing than I was at dancing. So that's kind of the story of that. But I also wanted to just, like bring it full circle again, and just like fully reference something that's the root one of the, I don't know, I think they call it like the four elements or something of hip hop. And also just make it interesting, make it fun.
Yeah, and looking at the pants, the Adidas, the three stripes that we see here, the three stripes not on the pants, but also on the sneakers too. So you have this the three, and then leading us into the three that's on the rabbit on its stomach. So let's see if we can. Once again, we have a close up, but let's move, and once again we see the sneakers of the breaker on the left, but leading us into the three here. And you talked about a little bit about line 3 also, and also the issue of appropriation. And these are the primary figures there. So let's or can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, this is from a cartoon called it's a reference to a cartoon called Little Hiawatha. And I think when I look at those cartoons, from that era, I think about the way that mainstream media would make the relationship between tribes in the United States and the rest of the United States. Try to make what was actually happening and what sometimes is still happening, like in the case of line 3, try to doctor it up and make it look cute and make it look pretty so they can spoon feed it to their kids, right? And their kids don't have to grow up knowing the truth about this country. So in my work, you'll see me reference, throughout my portfolio here and there, reference these older cartoons. And for me, that's just kind of my way of, I guess, bringing these images into my world and kind of making them, what I think they should be. And in this case, it's Little Hiawatha, and he's kind of about, he's sort of up against this jumbo kind of like fuzzy bunny that is line 3, or, like sort of a reference to line 3, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like it, and the masked figure, as you're saying, also, yeah, this representation or being in disguise for what it actually is, or what it means for a variety of different people too. And looking at the figure of Hiawatha here, I notice, is the BK on there? Is that British Knights, or is that
Yep, sure is.
All right,
British Knight moccasins.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So once again, the bring in the hip hop culture too for this. But yeah, I mean, this is very much this appropriation. The cartoonifying is still an issue, a problem that exists to this day, and it hasn't gone away. But bringing it into here also, and when you're referencing the figures from the left side of the panel too, this issue of appropriation and what does it mean, of course, is an important part of this work and looking at it, at least for my interpretation of the painting.
Yeah, I just it just seemed like a good fit, and it brought everything together, like this entire scene, where everybody's kind of creating this almost like a celebration of unity in a huge cloud of like tear gas smoke or something. And this just seemed like icing.
Is this like looking, I just want to pull us back out to the overall view. Looking at this, you balance, you could say bookend this painting with the police car on one side, and also the figure of Hiawatha on line 3. And is this, can we see this as kind of a closing in, or kind of a you could say like outside forces pressing in on a community or on a group of people?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe unconsciously it happened, but it does kind of look like those real problematic images are on the ends, and kind of like the community stuff is on the inside of the circle. And I think, if I had to think about it, that probably happened because I was on the fence as to whether or not I wanted to. Sometimes I don't like if there's like let's say there's somebody who is creating huge problem in the community. I don't even like to say their name sometimes. It's just like, oh, do we have to talk about this guy again? What, he's running for president again? I don't even want to say his effing name. You know what I mean? It's just like, just keep his name out of my house.
Right.
So I wasn't sure if I wanted them in there, and they probably went in last. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, like I'm not anti-police. This is a conversation. I have two dear family members who, one retired from the Minneapolis police force, and another one is a current member there. I think that there's just a huge conversation. There are a lot of things to be worked out there, and that's kind of why it was important for me to put that into the, to the cooking pot, but not have it be like propaganda, or some kind of like, this is, like how I feel about it. I just think that I feel it's safe enough to say that I feel that we need to, figure this out.
Yeah, a conversation, definitely, or a solution, right?
Some action. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I I I really appreciate your insight on this, on the other work. At this point, I'd like to see what we have. And if anybody has any questions for us, we can open it to the floor. And remember, if you have questions, please do ask in the Q&A. Please click on there. And then I will be able to read the question. I can read it to Jonathan. I'll just wait for anybody who wants to type in their questions. I saw there was somebody who raised their hand for the participants. If you could just please just type either into the chat or to the Q&A, and I can field that question for Jonathan. Here's a question. How long did the kids or the students work with you to produce this work?
I'd say there was about 4 or 5 students that were there the whole time, almost every time that I showed up, for about 3 weeks. And outside of that, there were a few students that came once, and a couple of them maybe came twice. So it was mixed, but yeah, there was about 4 or 5 students that were there almost the entire time. And I think I would work for a couple hours, and then they would come and go, and then I'd probably work for another hour. And there was one day, these guys were great. One day that I had to run, and they just kept working, and they cleaned up all the brushes and stuff, and I came back, and the next morning everything was ready to rock.
That's great.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
Do we have any other questions from the Q&A? I just wanted to say also, when you're talking about the Dixie Cups, I have very vivid memories of hearing Dixie Cups music as a child too, especially Chapel of Love. That was something that was a not too infrequent song that I heard in my youth.
Yeah, that's a great song. That was one of my mom's. She had a 50s classics cassette and would play that on road trips.
Do we have other questions from anybody? If I may, I'll just ask just in terms of your discussion of breakdancing. This is something also I think that when you're mentioning things like the Beastie Boys, and you're mentioning things like Run DMC, excuse me, and also breakdancing is something that I remember being enamored with also in my youth. But how far did you get before you realized this is, I don't know if I can keep continuing this?
Continue what?
Oh, with breakdancing.
Oh man, it didn't take long. So I started when I was about 11, and I bet you it was like 13. I was just, I guess I was just picking and choosing my battles, and I kind of got more into like skateboarding, and I was always into I think there was some other factors too, but it was just a couple of years. But growing up, like when I went to school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, one of my best buddies was in a actual breakdance crew, and I would get to watch them all sort of like practice, and they had the turntables, and they were pretty legit, and I just loved it. I just loved being kind of like standing on the side there watching them all do their thing.
Mhm. Yeah. We do have another question, and this is a question: do you work much with the artists at ICHO here in Duluth?
Yeah, the American Indian Community Housing Organization has been, I would say, an amazing ally ever since even before I moved to Duluth 8 years ago. I did an exhibit at what is now, what used to be Trepanier Hall and is now the Paulus Center. And then after moving to Duluth, they let me know that they had some funds to help me, buy some canvases and stuff like that. And I've been kind of working with them since. Their little gift shop, Indigenous First, has some of my G clay prints for sale over there, which they manage. If you ever are around there and you want a print of my work, that's where you can find it, and they handle everything.
Should I put a link up in the chat log for them?
Yeah, you could.
Yeah,
if you have one.
Let's see. Let's see.
And the artists, by the way, I realize I was talking more about ACO, but the artists, a lot of the artists there are good friends of mine.
Also, forgive me for mispronouncing ACO. Also, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's like what do they call it, acronym or something? So I don't know if there's a wrong way, but
okay.
Yeah.
We had a question. Is your grandma still alive? Has she seen this work?
My grandma is she left us in like 99, I think 2000. But I was thinking about taking my mom over there, who is staying with us currently this week until Thursday, helping me out with my newborn son a little bit here and there. And I was thinking tomorrow might be a good day to stop by the Tweed with her, if I can free up some time.
Yeah,
she would love to see it, because it's her mom that I'm kind of like, thinking about when I was creating the centerpiece.
Mhm. We have time for one last question. And this is, were you involved with a project on or in a building in Lincoln Park? And if so, what is happening with that?
Oh yeah. So maybe that's a reference to the building on it's like 24th and Superior. There was a mural that was installed there, which I designed, and it was painted at the College of St. Scholastica. The winter damaged that mural because it was one of those ones that you kind of like tack up on the wall. So something happened, like usually they stick, but something happened with this one. It had to be taken down. And there is a discussion as to probably painting it directly onto the wall this summer. And if things work out, I would definitely be, painting it myself.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your insight into this. And thank you everybody for attending as well. And thank you for your questions for Jonathan. This ends our special presentation. I know we went over, so thank you very much for staying over with us, Jonathan, for this. But this ends our interview with Jonathan Thunder over my grandma and your grandma. Just a reminder, please do visit us at the Tweed Museum of Art located on the University of Minnesota Duluth campus. We are currently open Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And you can see Jonathan's work is up until May 15th of this year. So run, don't walk to the Tweed to come see it. So thank you once again, Jonathan. Have a great evening. We really appreciate
Thanks, Colin.
you being here. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.